Okay, without further ado, I am so excited to be here and welcome you. I am your host, Christa Hull, and it's my total pleasure to be here with Rob Smith, who I will introduce you to in a moment in a little bit more detail. Some of you have been following and you might know this, and some of you, this could be brand new information. But recently, Michelle and I have launched what we call Community Academy, which is an online self-paced masterclass that teaches community marketing. And so in our masterclass, we cover off like the philosophy, how to, we provide tools and resources and lots of real life examples. We've created 6 modules and we launched it recently, just a couple of months ago, and we have our very first cohort underway. And I'm so pleased that a couple of our friends that are enrolled in the course are with us today. So Brianna and Teresa give a wave. So Michelle and I are really committed to creating community as much and often as possible. And one of the ways that we have decided to do that is by introducing this series of live conversations that we will host each month. You can mark your calendars if you like for the second Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. We'll be hosting guests in the spirit of branding together and creating community and also creating dialogue, discussion, and so that we can all learn from subject matter experts and from each other. So we have begun to craft a list of leaders that we inspire who are building brands and businesses with a deep focus around community. And so naturally, one of the first people that we thought of was inviting was Rob Smith. And so Rob is here today, and I'm going to give you a short introduction, and then we're going to dive into the conversation. Hi, it's so fun to have friends joining as we go. Welcome. Who just hopped on? Hi, Emmy. Welcome. Hi, Hillary. Great to have you with us. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Rob and we're going to dive into the conversation, and we'll just ask you to stay on mute for now. We're going to spend about the first 35 minutes or so, 30 minutes chatting with Rob, having a dialogue and discussion with him, and then we'll hold space for open agenda. So questions, comments, insights, we'll get into a discussion, and we would love to hear from you in the latter part of the call. Thumbs up? Shall we? Okay. So Rob, growing up, I'm going to read his bio to you because it's so great. And I didn't have a chance to memorize it because I didn't think I was hosting. But growing up on Vancouver Island, Rob learned to love adventure and movement through cycling, skiing, running, and surfing at a very young age. That passion grew into a professional career in 2015 when he, alongside his wife, opened Vancouver Running Co. Over the past decade, the business has evolved into what is known now as RunAsYouAre, merging running retail with health services and technology. Community continues to fuel the personality of the brand as it grows and appeals to more runners worldwide. Outside of building his business alongside his 2 partners, you can find Rob spending as much time outside with his family as possible or daydreaming about becoming a writer. So welcome to Brand Together, Rob.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you with us. And on the note about you being an aspiring writer,
Yeah.
you are a writer. And this
Oh, thank you.
morning I read a couple of the articles that you have written, which I want to plug before I forget to everyone on the call. If you visit Rob's page on LinkedIn and click on articles, you'll find a few different pieces that he's written with a lot of, like passion and inspiration around like his mindset around community and how he has leveraged it to build his brand. So before I forget to mention it, check those out. Okay, Rob, we're going to
All
start
right.
with rapid fire questions to get to know you, and then we'll
Okay, let's
dive.
go.
Okay. What's a nickname that you have that may not be widely known?
A nickname. Actually, I don't really have a nickname, but I do sometimes go by my three sisters' names when my dad is calling one of us out, because he has a tendency to Rolodex through the names before getting to the right one. So I can be Danielle, Samantha, or Tabitha outside of my regular name.
Before eventually becoming who you are.
Eventually he'll land on mine. Yeah.
I think we can all relate to the Rolodex, can't we?
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, what's your favorite soccer team, or is it football?
It's football if you want to, if we want to be proper. And no comments from anybody on the call. Bayern Munich is the only team that anybody really should be following.
The only team. What do you have to say? Don't hesitate to put it in the chat, friends. Okay, what's the thing that you think about most while you're running?
That's a good one. Uh, have you ever read the Murakami book around basically that very question? I it's a very, very good book. What's really interesting about that is I think, and I've spoken to a lot of people, I think when you're younger and you're running, you think a lot around like PBs and I'm gonna get faster and I've got a goal, or maybe I'm just getting into the sport. But a lot of people in my circle that have gotten a little bit older, as have I, use running more as like a mental health tool. So usually when I'm running, I'm actually just kind of like whatever comes, I sort of process, which is usually like ideation with the business. Or if we have some sort of challenge or like a marketing campaign or something coming up, I usually find I'm kind of running and ideating.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to that. Like it's a
Yeah.
creative space, blank space, creative
Yeah.
space, and a time to imagine. I love that.
Mm.
Okay, what's your favorite way to fuel up?
Fuel up. You know what? Fueling up is a bit, actually, I guess there's kind of two things. If we're talking straight food fueling up, it's honestly, it's kind of utilitarian and it's boring. But what I love doing is in the latter half of a long run, thinking about what I'm going to have for breakfast. Because I particularly enjoy running when the world is sleeping. So I get up quite early and run. And I always around, 10, 15 minutes left in the run, I think about over easy eggs and coffee and fruit. So I deeply love food, but I in particular, most of all, love my post-run food.
Love that. And
Yeah.
if we weren't talking about the kind of fuel to give you nutrition,
Yeah.
how else do you fuel up?
Music. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of music. Yeah.
Is there like a playlist that we should be following on Spotify that's a
Oh
favorite?
gosh. You know what's funny is years and years ago, I for Seawees, those of you that remember Seawees, rest in peace. That was the best race in Vancouver. I wish they'd bring it back. As a side note, if anybody is on this call from Lululemon that has influence, I was asked to write curate a playlist, and I thought this was like the most killer playlist ever. And I got so many comments that it was the lamest playlist ever. Mostly because it had music like LCD sound system on it where you can kind of like settle in. But apparently it didn't quite hit the mark for everybody. So I don't know if you want me to share my playlist, but I like everything from, I went and saw Sam Fender last weekend. That was a really good show, all the way through to like, give me some old school hip hop. I'm happy.
Nice.
Yeah.
But I'm channeling Michelle right now. Her husband Benjamin is a big runner, and he would say anything with bass and drums.
Yeah. If you look at somebody running on the seawall with giant headphones, you can almost guess what type of music they're listening to based off how they're running.
Ooh, there's a hidden talent. Good segue.
Yeah, you can sit on a bench, just make it like a weekday morning activity. You'll have a great time.
Awesome. Okay, well, that was a perfect segue to my last question. Do you have a hidden talent?
Oh, I guess this goes back to my three sisters. I can fold my ear in three different spots to plug it. And when I hit that perfect three fold, I can't hear a thing. Which I think again was developed from having three sisters and we're all really close in age. So I guess that would be my hidden talent. I can shut you up
Oh,
immediately.
DIY earplugs. I need to learn
Yeah,
to do it.
DIY earplugs, which come from my giant earlobes, but they come in handy,
I love,
assuming you have three siblings that can get on your nerves when you're in your teens.
love that. Birth order. Where are you in birth order with these three gals?
I'm actually the second youngest. Yeah. But my youngest sister's 4 years younger than me, and then my older sisters were actually really close. We're each 15 months apart. So
Sweet.
yeah,
Okay, are you feeling warmed up and ready to dive in?
let's dive in.
Okay, first question's kind of a big one. And I'll let you do with it what you please. But what
Okay.
does community mean to you, Rob?
Oh yeah. I mean, community is very like, it depends how you're thinking about community and it's also situational. Like if you're, as an example, if I'm working from home today, which I don't do very often, but when I'm at home, I very much think of community as like the tangible sort of, buildings, kids playing outside, that kind of thing. And then when I think of community outside of that, I really kind of think of like the group of people that's involved in like a shared activity. So, for running, that's really, really easy. Other sports, that's really, really easy. But yeah, community is hugely organic. It's really kind of developed, I think, primarily through relationships or somewhat proximity.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that the basis of community comes down to sort of shared interest or shared values.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what role has community played in your world as you've been growing these businesses for the past decade?
Well, community for me stemmed from really like a passion to be involved.
Mm,
So if you go way back before we opened Vancouver Running Company, I used to be on a cycling board
mm,
and I ran their cyclocross team and I devoted a lot of hours to that. And then when Becky, my wife, and I were getting to the point where it's like, I really want to, like, I'm really chomping at the bit to start a business. And we actually, in another world, my path would have taken me down the cycling world.
mhm.
And we had actually written two business plans. One was for a cycling business and one was for a running business.
Huh.
um, the cycling side, there was a number of red flags and things like that. So we didn't go down that route. But as we approached opening the business, I realized there was no way I was going to be able to devote the kind of time I was to the cycling side of things. So knowing that I was going to have to give that up, we actually wrote a component in our business plan that what I didn't realize at the time was the community side, but what it actually was at the time was an outlet for me to create like the fun side of it, I guess.
Mhm.
So yeah, the community side is, I guess in a lot of ways, I've been involved in community my whole life. I just didn't call it community. It was more just, again, a group of people that shared an interest and then it really just kind of built from there. And a lot of what I learned was really from that organic kind of like naivety almost around,
Mm,
let's build it, let's keep going. This worked, this didn't work.
mm.
Let's partner with these people, all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. Do you have a favorite community activation of all time?
The it's funny when you had asked me to do this call, I was thinking you'd probably ask a question like this. I still to this day, I go back because we still have our Vancouver Running Company website, but we kind of rebranded it and we've kept it going as an e-com site. And we have a lot of our old events and things like that on there. So I was going through and just thinking like, oh my God, the amount of things we just kept doing over and over again. And just to this day, I have no idea where I got the energy from. But 2017 in particular was one of my favorite years. Actually, it's too bad Michelle's not on this call because
Mhm.
in 2017, Michelle and I had met each other. I think actually sometime in 2016, we had started to kind of circle one another. She has running in her life and colleagues when she was at Lululemon that ran. So we just kind of knew each other, and Vancouver Running Company is located only one block from that head office. So our paths had crossed a lot, and we had sort of loosely talked about doing some sort of an event. And from the cycling world, I love alley cat racing. And for
Mm.
those of you that don't know what alley cat racing is, it comes from fixie cycling, If you look up Alley Cat Racing New York on YouTube, it'll blow your mind that these people are still able to ride a bike. It's just insane, some of this racing they do. But effectively, the basis behind the racing is you start in a common location and you have to end in another location, which is predetermined. And there's checkpoints along the way, and you can get to those checkpoints any way you want. It doesn't matter. So you can imagine how this goes in New York, downtown Manhattan, things like that, where there's just traffic everywhere. So I loved that concept. And I was actually taking out the garbage one day and Michelle was walking down the sidewalk. And I just started to riff off this idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if we did like an Alley Cat style race, but in Vancouver for running? And it snowballed from there into an event that we called YV Run. So YVR Vancouver, YV Run, where you paired up, if I remember right, you paired up to 4 other people. And then what we did is we gathered near Vanier Park is where it was. We gathered there. We set out the basis rules for the event. And then we gave everybody what was, I'm trying to think here, it would have been 1/12 of a map. That's right. So you got, oh no, was it, anyway, I'm gonna get it wrong, but it was a piece of a map that was downtown Vancouver, and each piece of the map had somewhat of a recognizable landmark on it.
Yeah.
So everybody right away was kind of jamming on what that landmark was, and then it was like we gave them a couple minutes to talk about it, and then it was go. And it was everything I ever wanted it to be. It was so much fun. And I took part as well, but because I knew all the landmarks, the team I was on, I wasn't allowed to chime in on anything. So I more or less kind of ran at a high heart rate for an hour and a half. But we went all over Vancouver. It was so much fun. And I think we had in the ballpark about 100 people take part, which you can imagine at certain areas in Vancouver when you have about 100 runners kind of show up, like at the art gallery and things like that, the kind of buzz it created. So that was definitely, so I have really fond memories of that one. That was fantastic. That was the first time we ever worked with Lululemon, or really like a big brand partner.
Mm. Mm.
And then the same year, because that event wasn't time consuming and big enough, we partnered with Red Bull, who we had also been partnering with quite often for an event they run called Wings for Life, which raises awareness and funds for spinal cord research and rehabilitation and things like that.
Yeah.
So we had partnered with them on that event a few times, and they wanted to elevate an event with us. So if anybody's worked with Red Bull, you know they have pockets that are so deep, they're endless. So that led us to taking helicopters, numerous helicopters, on basically as our transportation to a run. We called it We Run the Sky. And we left from kind of Pitt Meadows airport area. We had 3 helicopters in the air. We had photographers, videographers. It was just insane. So we went from like 2017 was like hyper grassroots, like maps, run around the city, all the way to like, what felt like this high production. We had a long table dinner in a hangar, or a breakfast in a hangar after that. And it was 2017 was community activation, community event, definitely the most memorable year.
So fun. Goes down in history.
It
17.
was, yeah, it was good. I still look back. I see we gave everybody tights for YV Run, and I still see people running in them. And it honestly just brings a smile to my face. We're almost a decade off that race, and people are still.
I love that. Who else gets sentimental about your like gear that represents like a favorite
Yeah,
moment or
yeah,
experience? I know I
yeah.
have
I know
like
it's
one of
pretty.
those Rubbermaid bins in my closet that I keep like special, curated, personalized uh,
Mm,
pieces that I've collected from events that were like meaningful and maybe even transformational in my life.
agreed. Yeah, it's good. I know, and I'm the worst because I don't display them, but they definitely sit in a shoebox.
Got you. Perfect. Okay, I've got another question for you. And it's that oftentimes, or in a lot of ways,
Mm,
community is like inherent to running. Like
yes. Yeah.
running and community kind of go hand in hand. What
Mhm.
advice do you have for brands or businesses that don't have as obvious a shared interest to
Mm.
rally people around?
Well, what's interesting is they might not think they have a shared interest, and sport is like we have it easy, I guess you could say. There's not a sport out there I can think of where there is not an immediate connection to a community. But there's community connections everywhere. I mean, there's digital community connections. There's reading groups, which a reading club is a community group.
Mhm.
Uh, there's all sorts of community groups out there. I even think all the way financial planners. Like this was actually in an essay I wrote for Monocle around. They asked me if I could also dig into like what do you do when it's not a sports-based community?
Mm.
And I think, you look at what might be a Titan, buttoned up kind of Cole Harbor-esque, persona, and they're thinking, I don't have a community. I go punch in, punch out, make my money and then go run on the seawall solo. But in actuality, the shared interest could be finance, or the shared interest could be art, or the shared
Mm.
interest could be food.
Mhm.
Uh, you look at brands like Dirty Apron for years, they created, and I'm pretty sure they still have the space on BD, somebody might correct me,
Mm.
where it's all based around cooking together.
Mm.
That's a huge community opportunity. Um, and so I think that, yeah, for sure, sport has it easy. Sport, I mean, we live in a world where you turn on the TV and there's sports all over the place. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily turn on the TV and see, somebody getting all red in the
Mhm.
face and passionate about talking about finance with a group of friends. But the reality is those, if you have an interest in something, then there is probably a community to be had around it.
Yeah, beautiful. I think it was the same article the Monocle article where you mentioned an example around like wine, like growing
Yeah.
wine, making wine, like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
was, I called it was an example around, what was it? It was a group of finance people and they could do grapes of cat or grapes of cash. Yeah, that's what
there
I
you
called
go. Grapes of cash.
it. I
That's it.
probably just aged myself because a lot of people I don't know who the grapes of wrath probably are. But yeah, you can, where you basically talk about, you could break it into a 2-hour event. So if you wanted to kind of carve it down to like, okay, what does that actually look like when deployed? Well,
Mm.
you invite a group of say 10 people, 20 people,
Mm.
and it's effectively a piggybacked experience. We actually did this with it was called Seawee's Unclinic, where we would train folks up for a first hour, and then the second hour we would do something that wasn't training.
Mm.
And the purpose behind that was to learn more about nutrition, to spend more time together, to just kind of get out of that like neurosis of like, oh my God, I'm training for something, everything's going to go wrong, because
Mm.
runners are really good at self-sabotaging
Mhm.
thoughts. So the point with that was, let's get their mind off the training, let's do the work, but then let's get their mind off it. And so when you look at like a finance group or something like that, you could spend the first hour talking about hedge funds and the second hour talking about wines of a particular region. Um,
Mm.
and always the interesting thing is, I think a lot of people will take like, it's like icebreaker questions and things like that. They'll sort of try to connect people before the thing, which I
Mm.
don't necessarily always think is the right way to go it. I'm a bit more of like dive in the deep end, and then when people kind of get out of that like uncomfortable space, which it can really be when you join a new community, then allow them to connect on something that's not, maybe they don't feel knowledgeable in. Or
Mm.
it's a really good example because you'll get people show up in a run group and it's already taken them a lot of nerve to show up. It doesn't matter what ability level they are. And you can
Mm.
always pick them out. They're the ones standing at the very back by themselves. They're not really talking to anybody. It's because they're really uncomfortable. But if you can get them out running, what you'll notice is they'll start talking.
Mm.
And it's actually one reason I love walking and running meetings, is because there's no kind of barriers around them. But really the point being, it's often more fun to get people involved in doing something together,
Mhm.
and then allow them a bit more of an intimate connection space after.
I love that. I think it's such a hot tip what you're highlighting, which is I think sometimes we get kind of laser focused on the subject matter or the product or
Oh,
the
yeah,
service, but
yeah.
we have an opportunity to think outside the box, and then B, like what I'm really hearing here is keep it light.
Yeah.
Um, and
Mhm.
not so, like in this case, focused on like the training or the competition or the goal. Uh,
Yeah.
keep it light, and then be creative, because you might be able to connect two different ideas or topics that seemingly aren't related, and create connection and belonging around it and fun.
Yeah, well, and the fun thing is you can create two topics that are not even remotely connected, which is sometimes even more fun.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
what's an example of that? We did actually although they're both kind of sport and health based for Seawees Unclinic, we did a training session, and then after that was around like your own personal movement.
Mm.
And what it spilled into was half of the people in the clinic had really poor movement. So it actually became a group of like 15 people just like laughing together, like falling over because their stability wasn't that great. And it actually just became a group of people like laughing and having a good time, which in a way that also just sheds away that like the
Mm.
nerves and that I don't know if I want to be here, but I don't want to be here type feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gets everyone grounded and levels the playing field.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, new question.
Mhm.
Um, we at Community Academy, we believe deeply in the power of relationships when it comes to building loyal customers, and we know you do too.
Yeah.
So how do you prioritize authentic relationships, and how do you model this for your team?
Yeah, I think, that if you go into creating anything community based, and honestly, it's really like for me, it's anything in life. I had a friend once that told me, and I ended up butchering what he actually said, but I've run with what I've said since. But everything you put out in this world is a direct reflection of yourself. So that can be everything, like the clothes you put on in the morning. That can be if you bring somebody a coffee in the morning, how you outwardly project your voice, how you open the door for somebody, how you treat team members. All of those things are direct reflections of who you are as a person. But what is also a direct reflection of who you are as a person are the events and
Mm,
the businesses you're involved in and those sorts of things. So really the frank response to that is like you can't be contrived. You can't sort of like bait and switch your community group in the sense that if you're attaching some sort of like monetary ROI to your events, if it's a
mm,
line item on your P&L, then you should probably just back away. It's not going to work for you. You'll get exposed really quickly. And you'll also become quite frustrated because the reality is community groups aren't there to drive a line item on that P&L. They're there to be the personality of your brand and to contribute to your brand. And I had a friend that was starting a business a couple of years ago, and they were asking for a little bit of advice, specifically around community. And I was saying the reality of community is like, and again, this is coming from a guy who had a community component unbeknownst at the time in my business plan, which was Flight Crew Run Club. It was really just we were launching a run club. Um, but you want to make sure that you're hyper flexible when you really kind of get into the community side of things at depth. And what I mean by that is, you might be a large brand with a really solid brand identity. You know what your mission statement is. You know the customer you're serving. You know all of those things. When you start a community side and when you put yourself out there, you have to be fully prepared to
mm,
have that community determine what your community's personality is, because you
mm,
can't as an individual go in and say, welcome to our first event. In this event you can talk 5 minutes after I talk, and you have to wear this, and well, that's not community. That's community is made up of all sorts of different personalities, walks of life, backgrounds, income levels, everything. And that's what makes it beautiful. So if you go in and you create an event or something like that, and it's not deeply authentic, and it has to be deeply authentic from the human perspective, not the business perspective. If it's
mm,
deeply authentic, then people will connect with it and they'll show up. But
mm,
if it's attached to if it's attached to a quarterly result or some sort of monetary KPI, then forget it. It's not going to work. You'll be found out.
Yeah, people can feel it. The
They can
intent.
feel it immediately, especially if you look from a consumer relationship perspective. Consumers are just so educated now, which is fantastic. And you have to be aware that if you don't go in as your full authentic self, then it's people just won't, they either won't return or they'll just straight up call you out on it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the perfect time for me to share a quote that I pulled from one of your articles.
Mhm.
I'll pop it in the chat. But you said, simply put, if your business were a human being, the people would be the beating heart and its community the personality,
Mhm. 100%.
which I think is so like such a nice way to bottom line what you just shared around.
Yeah, and they can't work without one another.
Right. Like heart and lungs can also not work without one another.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor.
Well, and that's where it gets so hard for,
Mhm.
listen, the worst thing that capitalist, Earth did was create quarterly results. Because the problem with quarterly results is when I had this conversation with somebody that was pretty high up in retail at Adidas, and they had opened some new store locations and they were wondering how they were going to stimulate community. And I could tell pretty quickly off the call that it was a line item. And so after this individual kind of explained it for a little bit, I tried my kindest way possible, projecting my wife's voice, be kind, to butt in and just say, like, I think this is a line item, isn't it? She's like, well, we do have, revenue attached to it and that kind of thing. And I said, well, you have to go back to the drawing board. So there's two things you're missing here. One is get it off that P&L
Mm.
and very much like buckle up for years. And I could see the look on her face was like, years? What are you talking about? And I said, you cannot monetize community. What happens with community is when you start community and when it is a product of your personality and you as a person and your business as people putting themselves out there in the world, what will happen over time is people will may or may not happen, but if you are really putting yourself out there authentically, they will grow an affinity for your brand. And you cannot even think about putting product or offers or anything in front of those individuals until you are 100% sure that they have first grown that affinity for your brand and second, become an advocate for your brand. And then when you get to that stage, it's not an overt like, hey, I want to pass this deal on to you, or you should come out to this event, special shopping night or something like that. You still have to tread really lightly.
Mm.
What'll happen is when you create this community and when you create a series of events or when you really put yourself out there, and I'm not joking, for years,
Mm.
people will become brand advocates. And that's the great thing about consumers now is there's brands out there that I would never even touch because I've seen the inner workings of them and I understand exactly what their community is all about. And there's brands out there that I will drop everything to go take part in because I know the human side of the brand is really authentic.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that's the most important thing to understand is there's probably many people on this call that work for large organizations and they're told to go learn community and how to deploy community because it's going to make money this quarter. Well, it's not.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack here. It's
Yeah.
so good what you're sharing. And it's striking a chord with me as Michelle and I build this business. Like, if we were to come to this call that we're hosting right now, this conversation with Rob, thinking like, how many like signups can we convert to our
Yeah.
masterclass? It's
Yeah.
over. Right? I think that's such a good example of like, no, the reason we come together is because we have a common interest in creating, like igniting a feeling around a brand and bringing people together to
Yeah.
feel connected and belonging. And it's the energy that we cultivate here together that um, is what hopefully creates like some meaning and some purpose. So I think this
Yeah.
is So great. I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'm going to let our friends on the call ask questions. I think I do just want to say, what would you say to somebody? Um, how would you coach somebody working for a corporation who has a boss looking for a direct return on investment with their community efforts?
I would I would guide them in understanding that the return on that is not monetary. Because you can have KPIs around community, and we have KPIs around community at Run As You Are, but they have nothing to do with money. So they have everything to do with actually creating a better community. So what I mean by that is, if we put on, actually one of our biggest event periods is coming up around the Vancouver Marathon. So we always have a series of events that takes place. So we actually put desired outcomes as our KPIs. And our desired outcomes are everything from how we interact with brand partners that we're working with, all the way to how we're showing up for the community and how many people show up. So we know that our space, don't tell the fire department, can fit about 250 people. And so we know if the space is full, then the flat out the event went off. But that's not necessarily what we're measuring. What we're measuring is we would much rather have 40 people show up to a shakeout run for the marathon that are really engaged, hanging out after the run, drinking coffee, chilling out on the chairs and benches and stuff and talking running, than we
Yep.
would 400 people that roll in, run, snap a couple Instagram photos, grab a free coffee and roll out. Because the majority of those people that have shown up in that 400 group, they're not really the personality that we're trying to cultivate. The folks that stick around. The best example is when I was growing up surfing, I loved going to surf shops because surf shops always had some sort of couch in the back with a surf video playing. And you could roll up into a surf shop, not even know the owner or anybody that works there, sit on the couch and watch the video and like start chatting with whomever else is saying it. And that's exactly that's a KPI. How many people came and watched the surf video on the couch today? But you need to, you really need to tell that individual, that senior leader, or whomever it is, that we can put KPIs around it. They just can't be based off a monetary ROI. So how many people did we get this week? We got 10. Awesome. Let's try to get 15 next week. How are we going to get 15? Okay, well, the folks that showed up last time were primarily female between 40 and 55, and all of them showed up in like tights and running shoes. Okay, where does that group hang out? Okay, let's try to reach them there because maybe they don't know about us. Sometimes we'll do shoe demo nights, which I'm not a fan of, but I'll use an example. Knowing how many people took a pair of shoes to try out is another one. Which I'm sure the brands that we work with when we're doing shoe demo nights, that's a KPI for them. How many people signed out a pair of shoes? Because it's an indicator on how many people are actually engaged. So when you create your KPIs around this sort of thing, what you want to do is have a direct line from what's the KPI? How are people engaged? What's the KPI? Does this brand partner want to work with us again? What's the KPI? How many people stuck around when they should have gone home because it's 10 o'clock and I need to go home? Are you pushing people out the door? So you have to be able to steer those that way. We actually have something at Run As You Are, which we always measure any event we do against, or when we're planning a large marketing campaign. And it's quite literally a triangle. And steal this for yourselves because it works really well. But we have Run As You Are as one of the triangle points. Brand partner or community partner is the other, and then community is the other. And anytime we're creating an event or a community activation, we make sure that each party is equally serving the other parties. And we do that with arrows, just simple arrows. So we sit there and say, okay, if we did an event with Nike, okay, is Nike getting good exposure? Are we putting whatever their goals are we putting that in front of people? Okay, we are. Cool. There's an arrow from Run As You Are being able to facilitate this for Nike. Okay, same thing. What's Nike doing for us? they're providing some money, or they're bringing up human resource help, or okay, great, they're serving us. Okay, how's Nike serving the community, and so on and so forth. But the key one is we always make sure, and we put percentages on these as well. We always make sure that the community one has the highest percentage. So
Mm,
how much time, effort, money, whatever, are we putting into the arrow that goes from Run As You Are to the community, and the brand partner that goes to community? So
mm,
we need to make sure that that one is always the highest. And we do that with community activations, and we do it with marketing campaigns as well. Um,
hmm,
and it's a check. It's really a way to check and balance to make sure that you're actually being authentic. And because if we create here's a perfect example, if you're using the triangle and we didn't visit the triangle and then realized, oh gosh, all we did was promote Nike, and all Nike did was give us money to promote Nike, and then people showed up and were kind of like, oh, that was fun.
uh,
Nothing really here for me. Um, then you've failed. Uh,
yeah.
if of course that's your goal. But yeah,
I
you really got
feel,
to,
oh no, go.
spinning it's the wrong term, but really getting people outside of that. Like, not everything has to make money.
Hmm. Yeah, spinning it or reframing it,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel an infographic coming on. Who wants an infographic? I feel
Yeah.
like we should have had the whiteboard.
Amanda will make an infographic.
There you go. I love that, the triangle. There's so many key points that you made that I love. And what I really heard is that KPIs are a must. Absolutely, you want to have KPIs in
Yeah.
marketing, and revenue shouldn't be one of them.
No.
If it's not about revenue, Rob, what is it about?
It's about building a culture.
Yeah, a
It's
culture, a feeling, engagement.
yeah, it's about community engagements. And look, the reality is I remember when we opened Vancouver Running Company, we launched Flight Crew Run Club a month later. And I was talking to, I can't remember who it was. But it was somebody in a financial institution that was looking at supporting us with a business loan. And they
Mm,
were asking about, um, oh, they were asking about the community side and asking why we were putting so much into the community side. And
mhm,
I remember they weren't quite getting it. And I said to them, we don't want to be a business that's just selling things to you. We
mm,
want to be a business that is also there in the community because we're taking up space in the community and
mhm.
we're asking the community to support us. And so we should also be giving back to the community.
Yeah.
And I wasn't an expert right out of the gate. Sometimes I would get really frustrated when we first opened because we were a small business. There was like 3 of us that worked there. I was working 6 days a week, and every community event was primarily mine and our run leaders' time. So who knows how many hours we ended up putting into this, but there would often be people that would show up for our community runs in shoes that we didn't sell. And it took me a long time to be okay with that. So I certainly wasn't an expert right out of the gate, but I knew that over time, people would say, oh, they're really putting a lot of time and effort into the community. I should think about them when I need new running shoes. And once I really kind of like came to terms with that, I personally could really say, okay, this is the purpose of community and this is the purpose of the business. And I have to make sure that they're not crossing wires all the time.
Got it. There's so much wisdom and insight here. Thank you. I love hearing from you with your like as an entrepreneur as well, who's been
Yeah.
doing this for 10 years. One of Christa Rand is here. You can't see her right now, but she's the co-host and producer of the Half Betty podcast. So I'll plug her for a hot sec.
Okay.
In the chat, she just reminded me of my favorite KPI, which is goosebumps. And I believe, like, it's a joke, but it's also like, how do you know that you're making someone feel something? Like, how
Oh
do you
yeah.
measure a feeling? And I know it when I get goosebumps or like when the hair on my
Mhm.
body stands up.
Yeah.
So like joking, but not joking, KPI goosebumps, look for it everywhere because it's like a very clear indicator that you're doing something right or you're like moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then you also made me think of like back in the day at Lululemon, we used to measure things like how many yoga mats we gave away
Mm-hmm.
or how many pairs of groove pants. And now I'm dating myself, but like the spirit was how many people were trying yoga for the first time,
Yeah.
perhaps, or trying a pair of $100+ pants for the first time and discovering like how the quality of the design, functionality, and fabric like makes you feel and how that relates to how you show up in the world or show up on
Mhm.
your yoga mat or
Mhm.
to your workout.
Yeah.
Okay, I promised this group that they'd be able to ask you questions, and I'm sure that there's so much. So I think we'll put a pin in it there. And what I want to say, like, let's open it up for questions, but also insights. Like there are
Mhm.
seasoned, talented community builders in this space. I have goosebumps actually thinking about like that you all showed up. And how much wisdom and talent there is on this call. I'm already learning next time we need to make sure you can kind of get connected and know who
Yeah.
each other is because there's a really incredible crew here. So, questions, insights, thoughts on anything that's come up in conversation or maybe something that hasn't. Amanda, you're up.
Okay, I have a few questions, but I'm going to start with this one. You talked about that. I mean, I've been to several of your events over the years. They're always wonderful, Rob. Thank you. You talked about that Red Bull event that just had that huge budget, but I know you also do really small, scrappy events. Is there any relationship between how much money is spent and impact on brand?
No, not at all. No. Here's a soccer example. Some of the best soccer matches you'll ever see are on the streets of Brazil. Or you can go to a giant stadium for the World Cup. But
Mm.
when it comes to money, money supports for sure, but it can also hinder. Um, so, when you have a large budget attached to an event, it's kind of like having that minimum spend at a wedding bar. It's like, oh my God, we got to spend the money. So you do feel I personally feel a bit more released from the shackles when there's a small budget.
Mm.
Because then you can really it's a real people powered thing. So yeah, no, I've quick, straight answer, not at all.
It's I'm just gonna underscore that with the YV Run example versus Seawees.
Yeah.
Different scales, but
Yeah.
not necessarily different outcomes for the
Yeah.
individual participating. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's actually probably the word I'd lean into is outcomes. When people walk away from the event, when I think of budgets, I also think of what are people going to feel or remember when they walk away. Um, People will remember from We Run the Sky, they'll remember oh my God, I can't believe we just took a helicopter and went running. But what will come of that is the relationships that they built and sort of the wow factor that went into that. The same way as on a Thursday night flight crew run, somebody might meet a future partner, which has happened. So there's, the outcome and the way people feel when they leave something is what's important.
Yes.
Mhm.
Here, here. What else is in the space? Questions, insights. Connor.
Hey Rob, that was awesome. And thanks Christa for putting this on. It's always great to see what the community's up to. And when I
Hmm.
moved to Vancouver, I immediately found out about Van Run Co and popped in there, and they've been nothing but awesome people and doing great things. My question is, being in retail now, um, is there like a percentage that you think about for events you host that are inside versus outside the four walls? Obviously, a lot of the
Mm.
events you do are in your store, but
Mhm.
if you had to assign a percentage or think about, other areas you're trying to spread awareness, how you think through that?
Yeah. Um, Connor and I just saw each other yesterday. Nice to see you again. Um, yeah, it's interesting that it's a super good question because I think by default you'll use the space that you have. But what we've learned over time as well is, and we actually learned this more at Vancouver Running Company, and implemented into Run As You Are is we didn't realize how intimidating the space could be for people. So what I mean by that is, we always joke, running is wildly accessible. Sure, if you have $200 to spend on shoes, $150 to get a coach every month, another $300 for your outfit, and then that's without buying your $5 per gel, and then I'm going to go travel to a race and that costs $2,000. So when you have a retail space that's facilitating those things, it can be very intimidating. So we learned pretty quickly to take things off site just to start them. So Connor, when you kind of rolled and were with us at VRC, we often started the flight crew runs outside. And that was one of the main reasons. Is it was a common space that was accessible to everybody. It was just in a park. The city park is where we started from. And our runs actually grew. Because I think word got out that, like, if you need to leave your bag, sure, throw it in the shop. But we're just going to start in a park, and we're all equals, and we're in a park, and it's, free, and we're going to go for a run together, and that doesn't cost any money. So we actually, yes, 100% agree. If I had to put a percentage on it, that's probably no like hard percentages. But I do think that experiencing the space is also a really good thing. So, you could even just start it like a 50-50 thing. If you're running a weekly run, you could start one week, at a store location or a business location. And then the next week you could just start out on the sidewalk and then go from there. But you'll find over time that the demographic and the people that show up is actually probably different.
I would just add, if I may, like one thing to consider here is like hosting events inside the four walls can often be like, useful, powerful when it's about your intention is about nurturing the community that you already have. And then going outside your four walls is a great approach when it's, your intention or the outcome you're looking for is to find new friends and build new community.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's go one more. Question, comment, insight. Yeah, Amanda, do
One
it.
more if nobody else does. Rob, you said something that struck me, something about community being a product of you as a person. And I know, like, when a business is small, and probably in the early days of Vancouver Run Co, you were probably at almost every single event. At what point do you think owners don't need to be deeply involved in their community events? And what do you think is the value of owners being involved?
Yeah, I'll start with the second half. The value of owners being involved is, if you're an entrepreneur, strictly speaking from an entrepreneurial perspective, but if you're a larger organization, you would need to, I think it still comes down to the people that are running it. But I think you have to show up because it's good to have continuity for the community. Plus, it's just, if you're, again, authentic about your community, it's just fun to show up and be a part of it. And I think you would find, even if you work for a larger organization, that how many people work for, a global, like, publicly traded company, and they're working at night. Wouldn't it be cool that instead of opening the laptop up at night, you actually laced up your running shoes or went to a cooking class? That could be, what you're doing instead. So I think it makes a lot of sense in order to help build it and create continuity. But I actually like very, very much remember when I thought, oh, I can actually step away a little bit. And I call it sort of like it started to self-perpetuate itself. Where people that came to like our weekly runs started to bring friends to our weekly runs. And then our run leaders started to say, can I do the announcements and run everything this week? And we go, yeah, absolutely. As that took place, I realized, oh, I actually have a little bit more free time. I don't have to show up all the time. And now with Run As You Are the way it is, and so many people involved in Run As You Are, the brand has its own personality. Which is a result of what Nick and I have created and the people around us have created. So I'm confident and I know that whatever event is created or takes place, it is a direct reflection of our personality. So it's tough to put a pin on what that moment looks like, but for me, it was very obvious because people were really wanting to step up and take the reins, and the group just kept growing and growing and growing. But certainly at the beginning, yeah, you definitely need to be involved.
Nice. Another solid question. We're going to wrap. And before we do, I just got a couple quick PSAs. So to everybody who said yes to carving out time in your calendar to be with us for our very first ever Brand Together conversation, on behalf of Michelle and I, we're so honored. Thanks for coming. And you can find us same time every month. So second Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific. Rob, you're incredible. I had goosebumps multiple times today. I'm so glad that you said yes to joining and being our very first guest. You can follow Rob at I am Rob Smith on Instagram. You can also find him, he's Robert Smith on LinkedIn, and I highly recommend you follow him there because his writing is exceptional and you can support his dream of becoming a writer. And then RunAsYouAre.co is the website. And then I'm just gonna quickly share, in case you haven't already, in case you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, I've got a quick QR code because I don't want you to miss our incredible lineup of guests that are coming. And there it is. So you can just take a hot sec to either grab a screenshot of that or grab it with your phone. We would love to see you at future Brand Together conversations. And we'd also love to hear from you if you have requests for who you want to hear from in the community space or brands or leaders that you admire or you want to nominate, please let us know. And then last but not least, thanks so much for being here. You can find us at communityacademy.co and you can follow us on the socials as well. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Claire, for doing such incredible design work for us. We love our brand. And have a great day, you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.